Hi, this is Pastor Ken, and I wanted to share with you a story of something that happened to me many years ago. But before I share that story, I want to read to you from the Gospel of Matthew. When Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, there came wise men from the east to Jerusalem, saying, "Where is he that is born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east and are come to worship him." Now, the title of this video is Churches Closed on Christmas Day. Now, this was many years ago when I was serving a church, and it was Christmas Day, but it was not Sunday, and the church that I was serving was closed. And I was walking my dog around the church. And as I was walking my dog around the church, a few cars began to come into the parking lot and pull in. And I was rather surprised because all the members of our church knew that we didn't have a service on Christmas Day. And as they got out of their cars, I was able to greet them only because God had placed me right there at that particular time because I was walking my dog. Otherwise, I would not have been there. So I know it was God's hand for me to greet them. And it turns out that there were about 4 cars and maybe about 15 or so individuals who just arrived from the nation of India. And they wanted to go to a church service on a holy day that they knew Christians had, namely Christmas Day. And it was a great disappointment for me to basically say, well, the church is closed, but I'll be glad to open up the church and have you come in, and I'll show you around, and I'll talk to you a little bit about Christmas Day and what it means, and we'll do our best to explain to you the story of Christmas. Now, it turns out that these folks, I believe, were Hindus, and they had just arrived in this nation. And they were curious and they were interested. And in their minds, they knew it was Christmas Day. So, therefore, Christian churches should be open and something should be happening on Christmas Day at a church. Now, in the 42 years that I've served, every single church I've served chose a Christmas Eve service and not a service on Christmas Day. But I do remember in one community where I served that there was a church that retained the idea and the availability of actually having a service on Christmas Day. Now, of course, the arguments would be that Christmas Day is for family and folks should be with their family on Christmas Day. And yet, we acknowledge it to be a very holy day. And so, how things have transpired is that most Christian churches are closed Christmas Day, and there's no service offered on Christmas Day. So this whole experience for me brought this to light. because these were visitors from the east, so to speak. They were kind of like the modern day wise men coming to look for the birth of the Christ child. And they had the right idea. They got in their cars and to the place that they knew was a Christian church and wanted to experience something on Christmas Day that was uniquely Christian. So I thank God that I had the privilege to speak to all of them and to show them around the church. And even at that particular time, my son came down and played piano for them. And it was very nice to meet them and greet them. Of course, I invited them to come back, but they never came back. But it was just that one unique experience for me of actually experiencing something like in Matthew's gospel, visitors from the east coming and asking, where is the Christ child? Where is the service? What's all this about Christmas? And it's Christmas Day and there's nobody around in a Christian church. So my friend or my brother or fellow pastor, I'm not commanding or insisting or demanding to have churches open on Christmas Day. I'm trying to just simply bring out the irony of it being a most holy day, and yet looks like 95% or more of the churches in America are closed and people are in their homes and not at church. Now, the counter argument is, of course, that the Christmas Eve service takes care of that. In other words, it used to be that there would be services like at 11 p.m. and that the service would sort of end at midnight. And so you could technically say, well, I was in church on Christmas Day at midnight, 2 minutes after midnight, Christmas Eve. Well, then that kind of went backwards in time, and churches went to a service at about 7:30 p.m. And now, even more recently, the times have been moved back even further, where maybe now it's anywhere from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Last church, previous to my last church that I served, they were concerned about people driving at night and families being together. So they actually moved the hour to 4 p.m. and it was called a Christmas Eve service. I just wanted to share with you the privilege that I had on that day to host maybe 15 people or so who were Hindus who'd come over from India and were seeking a Christian worship service experience. And I, of course, was able to give them some scriptures, pray with them, and so forth. But think about this. If Christmas is a hallowed day, a holy day, is it just something that we just spend time opening gifts and being with family? And I'm not putting that down because family is very important. But if it's really a hallowed day, then maybe there needs to be a lot more there in our homes, and maybe even one pastor somewhere and one church somewhere will say, we are going to have a service on Christmas Day. And my response usually is something like, well, even if there's only one or two there, I'll still hold the service, because most people will put it down and say, everybody's going to be with their family. They don't want to be in church. And just think about the irony of the whole thing, that is the kind of response that you'll hear if anyone attempts to do a service on Christmas Day. All this came about because, like anyone else, I was doing something else on Christmas Day. We had our Christmas Eve service, and then very suddenly, there was about 15 who had just arrived from India